So as we have mentioned in the pom.xml file, you see that life cycles. So now we are going to look into the life cycles in depth. So Maven is basically a build lifecycle oriented and clearly says that these steps are well defined to get the desired output after the successful execution of the build lifecycle. So Maven is based around the central concept of build lifecycle. So what this means, what does this mean is that process for building and distributing a particular artifact, basically a project, is clearly defined, or the person building a project should be at least clearly defined. So this means that it is only necessary to learn a small set of commands to build any Maven project, and the POM will ensure they get the results that they desired. So Maven comes with three built-in build life cycles, so that you can see on the screen. So default, one build life cycle, clean, another life cycle, site, another life cycle. So let's begin with a default, then we will move to clean and then site. So what does a default build life cycle will do? A default build life cycle, so this handles the complete deployment of the project. So what happens inside that default, you see here, you begin with the validate. It begins with the validate. It validates the source code, then it compiles the source code. It will uh, convert the source code, the JavaScript, which is written in human readable format, into machine language. Basically, you say bytes, bytes, bits and bytes. You say bytes, not bit, bytes. Okay. So then this will be converted into, then once it's compiled, then it will go for the testing. So here it's unit test and integration test. So here we'll say unit test, then packaged, and after the packaged, integration test, and then we will verify the same and install and finally deploy. Sorry. So this is the complete deployment of a Java project. So that's how a default build lifecycle look like. Then we will look into a clean life cycle, a clean build life cycle. So this, what does a clean build life cycle do? So this build life cycle involves cleaning the project, as the name says. As the name says, cleaning the project. So for what you need to clean, for a fresh build and deployment, if you want to create a fresh build and if you want to deploy it, so for that purpose you require a cleaning. So for that we'll use a clean build lifecycle. So it consists of a pre-clean, then pre-clean is done, then we go for the clean, and then finally we do the post-clean. It's the complete cleanup of our Maven repository. Then the last build lifecycle that we have here is site. So site, so this handles the generating the Java documentation of the project. It's mainly to generate a Java documentation. So pre-site, and it starts with the site. There you write something, creates a Java documentation. Then it will do the post site after the site, and after the post site, it will deploy the documentation into that. So that's the final one. It's called site deploy. So each of these build life cycles is defined by a different list of build phases, wherein a build phase represents a stage. Phase is equal to stage in the life cycle. So for example, let's take the default build life cycle, a default life cycle which comprises the following phases that you can see on the screen. For a complete, you can see the complete list of life cycles. Of course, whatever life cycle that we have seen here, they are just three, but if you want to explore, still you can get the complete list of life cycles, but these are not the complete list. Okay, there are a few more, but we will be discussing only three which are very important for us. Anyway, the default build life cycle begins with a validate phase. Either you can call it as a step or stage or phase. We would say phase. Okay, so the better terminology is phase. What is validate phase? Validate validate is the first phase for our default build life cycle. So a validate, it validates the project. The validate the project is correct and all necessary information is available. That's what the validate does. It validates the project whether it is correct and all the necessary information is available. So once the validation is done, then it goes to the compile. So it compiles the source code of the project and it will convert that into the byte code. Then once it's converted into the byte code, so then it will go for the testing, the test. So the test, then it tests the compiled source code using a suitable unit testing framework. You have to use an external third party tool here, so that's the reason you have to use a plugin. You have to write that plugin inside your pom.xml. So these tests should not require the code be packaged or deployed. So then we'll go for the, once test is done, now it's time to package your compiled source code. So package, it takes the compiled code and packages it in its distributable format. It's normally a jar format, JAR. So once package is done, so now it's time to uh, cross verify the things. Okay, so few, normally this integration test, few will do that earlier, but that's fine. All okay, so then we'll go for the verify. So what's verify? Verify, run any checks on the results of integration tests to ensure quality criteria are met. So then we will go for install phase. So install the package into the local repository. That's what we call it as install. And once it is installed into the local repository, once the package has been installed into the local repository for use as a dependency in your project locally, so then the final step for us is to, once install is done, then the final step for us is to deploy. So deploy done in the build environment. So it copies the final packages to the remote repository for sharing with developers and projects. So this is what the deploy is. Deploy doesn't mean the deployment that we do, like deploying an application or deploy. No. So here what happens when we say deploy phase, here whatever the package that has been built during this default build life cycle, that package has to be put into some other server. It is not meant for this server because this server is called a build server, but this package should be put in some other server, maybe for testing or staging environment or for the quality assurance or for the some other activity. So you have to do that. So you have to keep, you take this. Once it is built, then from here you have to deploy it into the some other server. So this is called deploy here. So these life cycle phases are executed sequentially to complete the default life cycle. Given the life cycle phases above, this means that when the default life cycle is used, Maven will first validate the project here, validate the project, then we'll try to try to compile the sources or source code, then run those against the tests, run those compiled code against the tests, and then package the binaries, then package the binary code. Basically it was converted into the binary language, so package that into binary jar code, then run integration test one more time and against this package, that package, and verify the integration tests, and install this install this verified package to the local repository, then deploy this install package from local repository into the remote repository. So that's it. From validating the source code, then compiling the source code, then testing the source code against some tests, and then packaging it, and then doing integration test and verifying the integration test efficiency and effectiveness, then finally install it in your local machine. Means you just put it in your any local repository, and then finally from here you keep that installed package in your local repository and put it into the some other repository for different purpose. Could be a testing, could be a staging, could be a quality assurance, and this is called a deploy, and this is called a complete build life cycle of default. And these are the different phases in that default build life cycle. So then we have one more life cycle to be seen, that is clean. So build life cycle of clean phase. So this clean phase is used to clean up the project and make it ready for the fresh compile and deployment. So the command used for uh, this purpose, this life cycle is uh, mvn clean. So if we say mvn post clean, so then it will be cleaned after the default build life cycle has been executed. So when this command is invoked, Maven execute the tasks via executing the commands like Maven pre-clean, Maven clean, and then Maven post-clean. So this means Maven, when you execute this, the Maven clean, so it first execute pre-clean command, then it executes clean command, then finally it executes Maven post clean command. So this Maven's clean is a goal, and on executing it cleans up the output directory, basically target folder, by deleting all of the compiled files. So note, whenever a Maven command for any life cycle is invoked, Maven executes the phases till and up to the invoked phase. Example, when we say mvn clean is invoked, when mvn clean is invoked, Maven will execute only the phase clean, but no compile or deployment site phase is invoked, because this is just Maven clean. If you want to invoke compile, deployment, and site phases also, then you have to use some other commands. So then let's look into the site life cycle also one more time. For that, I am taking back you to the previous slide because I did not put it here. Yeah, here it is. Here is our site life cycle. So apart from cleaning, compiling the source code, building a deployable format of the application, Maven has phase which does more than these phases. This is one of the vital feature provided by Maven, which generates the detailed documentation of any Java project. That's very important. The documentation is very important. So this project documentation has dedicated phases, which involves a pre-site and site, then post-site, then finally site deploy. So the command used in Maven to generate Java docs for a given project is mvn space site. Basically, when this command is invoked, Maven calls doxia document generation, the docs, basically documentation generation, and other report generating plugins. So here, so there are a lot of plugins. So doxia is one and doc is one. So it will call that plugin, so which can be used for the documentation generation. So doxia is basically a framework used for content generation by Maven. So this generates contents both in static and dynamic way. So this is how the life cycle's default clean site works.